I really thought I was done with this topic, and then we got Red Hat's response. It went about as well as most people expected, and then from there, things just got kind of weird. So in my previous video, my goal was to really try to help people understand a bit more about how things may work on the corporate side and how that might fit in with something like Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So let's talk about the fallout from that, and also let's talk about one of the things that I kind of saw some people reacting with in general, not just in my video, but in general. So one of the kind of sentiments that I saw was that companies are going to be moving away from Red Hat, and that may very well happen. However, I think it's very unlikely that we will see any kind of fallout from that until probably next year at the earliest. The reason I say this is because, in my experience, a company generally needs time to make a decision like that. They have to do probably something like a study to figure out if they can actually make that move. They first have to figure out the viable alternatives to Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and then they have to ask questions like, does the new distribution meet any regulations we have to meet? Does it support the software we want to run on it? And other things like that ultimately are going to take time to answer. They got to make sure that they dot all their I's and cross all their T's. That to me is probably at least a month, and that's if a company's on it and it's a high priority. And after that, it may take months or even years to actually do the update, especially if they already have a contract in place for an extended period of time. I don't know that we'll really see a lot of fallout from this until a bit further in the future. The other thing that I would add is if we are seeing people that are leaving now, I suspect that they already were planning to leave Red Hat. Alternately, one theory that I heard is that there were some pretty prominent companies that were leaving Red Hat, and that was potentially something that ended up prompting IBM to actually make this move. And if that's all I had to talk about, I wouldn't have made this video, but I think the things that happened kind of after Red Hat's response have been really interesting. The first story that kind of came on my radar as a follow-up to this is the fact that Suse is going to be forking RHEL and creating a new version of RHEL. I don't know what they're going to call it yet, but they're also going to invest $10 million over the next couple of years, I believe, and essentially create a version that's going to be compatible with products, it sounds like, that are compatible with RHEL. So I assume that, after the initial fork, that it will start to differ from Red Hat Enterprise Linux, but that's just my assumption based on, some of the other fallout that we've seen for like Rocky and Alma and all that. And speaking of Rocky Linux, the group behind Rocky Linux is actually partnering with Suse on this. So that'll be interesting to see kind of how everything plays out and how this all comes together. Alma Linux, meanwhile, will move away from a one-to-one copy of RHEL and instead focus on being application binary interface compatible with RHEL. What that means is that software designed on Red Hat Enterprise Linux should be able to run on Alma Linux. They also note that since they're not trying to be bug for bug compatible with RHEL, it's possible that some of the bugs that they may encounter can be fixed midstream without having to wait for necessarily the next update cycle. It appears that this will be its own distribution. It won't really match anything else, at least from what I can tell. I'm not really seeing any kind of comment that says, oh, hey, it's going to match, this other distribution. So it looks like it will just be a different spinoff of RHEL. So we'll have the Suse spinoff of RHEL. We'll have the Alma Linux spinoff of RHEL. And then I felt like, okay, the dust is starting to settle. This story will go away. And, I won't really have to make another video about it. And then this happened. So yes, I was a little surprised to see Oracle kind of jump in the fray like this. But then I found out about Oracle Linux and it made a lot more sense. Their blog post is titled, "Keep Linux Open and Free. We Can't Afford Not to." And it was made by the chief corporate architect and the head of Oracle Linux development. The thing that stood out to Oracle's announcement to me was just how pointed it was, and I want to get to some quotes from it. But Suse's announcement was more kind of neutral, maybe slightly passive-aggressive. Oracle was really just more aggressive. and they really tried to hammer IBM. So let's take a look at the first quote that I wanted to talk about. Quote, Oracle makes the following promise. As long as Oracle distributes Linux, Oracle will make the binaries and source code for that distribution publicly and freely available. Later on, they kind of push IBM a little bit on the GPL v2, and I can understand why that is something that a lot of people have brought up. They kind of tout themselves as this big holder of the GPL v2 and, tout and even encourage people to make downstream distributions of Oracle Linux for free or commercial use. I also wanted to, again, try to put this in perspective. So last video, we talked about how, Suse's cap is like $2.6 billion. Meanwhile, from what I'm seeing, IBM's cap is $121 billion. So a vast difference. But then you get to Oracle. Oracle's market cap is $318 billion. So more than double the size of IBM. So again, we're talking about a very big player in the tech world, and I will be very curious to see, if companies start moving to Oracle Linux, particularly if they're already using Oracle products somewhere else. And like I say, Oracle Linux flew completely under my radar. I did not realize that they really had a Linux distribution, just because I see most of their products more talked about with RHEL. Right now, Oracle Linux is RHEL compatible, but they do go on to mention in their posts that, as of a certain version, they won't be able to guarantee that any longer, which makes sense due to the entire situation. So I do have to get to one more quote, because the first time I saw this, I just really started laughing. And this is one that I probably will laugh during now. So quote, finally, to IBM, here's a big idea for you. So let me back up just one second. So one of the kind of things that IBM talked about in the blog post is essentially, we have Red Hat engineers working on, this, and we don't want to essentially give that work away for free. So this is kind of Oracle responding directly to that. So quote, finally to IBM, here's a big idea for you. You say that you don't want to pay all those RHEL developers? Here's how you can save money. Just pull from us. Become a downstream distribution of Oracle Linux. We will happily take on the burden. And the reason I find this so funny is because this is kind of like, I feel like what happens when you see this kind of quote, it's more the much smaller company saying this to a bigger company. Like if the bigger company is complaining about something, you'll hear a smaller company kind of pipe up and say, oh yeah, if that's the case, then do this, or let us take over, or whatever. And in this case, it's kind of weird because Oracle is so much bigger than IBM, but at the same time, Oracle Linux is much smaller than Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or at least that's what I would guess. My response to Oracle, though, is let's talk about that ZFS licensing. How about that? And then finally, we have one more piece of news. And, I was thinking this kind of became the month of Linux. Well, it's now officially the year of the Linux desktop, because Linux has a 3% market share in the desktop market. Sorry, the meme has to be said, but, it is something that's kind of cool to see Linux actually crack 3% at this point and see that growth. This to me is encouraging, but also somewhat expected. More and more people seem to be getting frustrated with Windows, specifically Windows 11. So I do wonder if this number may continue to grow a bit as more and more machines, are not able to be upgraded to Windows 11, or if we get to Windows 10 end of life, things like that. I don't know. Maybe some of those Windows 7 users will actually figure out that they can move to Linux and still game. But personally, I find this kind of crazy about how much the kind of corporate Linux landscape has changed in the past month or so. And I'm curious to see how this is going to continue as the years go on and we start to see some of the consequences of these actions. Will Suse ended up creating another distro out there for their, business customers? Will Red Hat have any long-term effects from their decision? Or will they end up going under Oracle Linux? I doubt that, but who knows? But what do you make of all this? What are your thoughts on kind of all the drama? Where do you realistically see this going? Or do you see any of these moves end up mattering? As always, thanks for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.